Cybershorts Episode 1 by yours truly, Nick Burnette. The Neon Carrot was a bar with a flickering sign above its door. The bar rested on a corner of the downtown area of New Seattle City, and it was waiting for the evening crowd. Anita was a working girl. She didn't have many options, and since she was pretty and tough and good at reading people, she had a way to pay her rent and feed herself. She wasn't fully awake as she waited for the Neon Carrot's automatic doors. Nico was behind the counter, cleaning. She didn't work for Nico, who was the owner and operator, and an all-around poor excuse for a bartender. She frequented here often enough that the cybernetic implants in her hair, the Medusa snakes, slithered at his familiar face. Anita touched the snakes, wishing she could disable that feature. She was still getting used to the implants and hadn't figured them out entirely. Being a working girl, she thought the snakes would be a clever way to stand out. The idea was to let her clients enjoy a little fetish or a little curiosity, or at least to be memorable. The cybernetics were expensive, and the snakes took a bit of getting used to. "Morning, Nico," she called. The bar was mostly empty, so her voice carried easily across the floor. Nico decided not to correct her, and continued to polish his dingy counter. It felt too early to be here. Just a lonely room, a fan blowing tirelessly, and the impending nighttime crowd. In fact, there were only a couple of other guys here, and she didn't bother to look at either of them. She felt Nico's eyes on her as she sat at the bar. "Hungry?" he asked, as she rested her hands on the counter. Despite frequent wiping, it was always a little sticky, which might have something to do with the cleaning regs. It was like Nico refused to buy new ones. He was staring at her chest, and then realized it, quickly looking away. "I need something fresh, or at least not fried," she said. Anita ignored his eyes, as she did not do business with people she knew, and not that she really knew Nico, but she knew him enough not to do business. One date would lead to discounted drinks, which would lead to discounted dates, which would lead to some form of misplaced possessiveness. So, no. He reached down and opened a small cooler door, and he seemed to deliberate there before emerging with a bowl of chopped lettuce, poorly covered, with a pale tomato wedge topping. She looked at it before accepting. The nameless sounds of the city appeared as the door opened and two men entered. The city hushed again when the doors closed behind them. The men walked in, one sleeveless and a weightlifting enthusiast with a chest that was too big to be attractive. The other wore a jacket that probably had bloodstains on it. She knew men like this, and she avoided them when she could afford to. Anita ignored them ordering drinks, and went about avoiding the brown pieces of lettuce in her bowl. The door opened again, with more sounds of the city. It was hard not to look when that door opened. A man entered, his head low, shielding his face under a baseball cap. The guy's hat looked brand new, therefore out of place. Anita noticed things like that, which was good for a girl in her line of work. She spotted cops easily enough, although a few of her clients actually were cops. This guy wasn't a cop, but he was out of place. He approached the bar and sat, keeping his head down but scanning the room. He was trying to shield his face with the brim of his hat, but he was close enough that she recognized him. Anita quickly turned away. In a big city like this, what were the odds of running into a John? He'd been her client a couple of days ago. She had found him tipsy and celebrating something big at work, so she approached him for a date, and they'd soon finished the transaction. After he passed out, which only first-time clients were ever that stupid, she took his cash and what looked like a valuable disc, because she would never see him again. The disc, it turned out, was something that her usual hacker friend wouldn't dare to touch, which made it almost worthless to her. He looked at her. "You!" She stood, attempting to leave, but he placed an unyielding hand on her arm. "You have it. I need it back. I need it back now." This had never happened to her before, running into a John she'd stolen from. Strangely, he didn't sound mad. He sounded scared and desperate. "I didn't take anything," Anita lied. Not like she could say it was some other girl with snake implants. She again tried to leave, but his hand squeezed, threatening bone. His grip was stronger than she expected. "Not here," Nico warned, and a pang of guilt hit her for bringing this into his place. She looked at Nico with a silent plea, but it fell flat. Nico was a business owner and wouldn't take sides. which was exactly the best policy for him, but that didn't help Anita at the moment. You nasty little... It doesn't matter. You took a disc, and I need it back. Do you hear me? I don't give a damn about anything else. I need that disc. The Medusa implant sensed danger and slithered into tight spirals around her skull. She considered her hidden stiletto, but she placed a hand to his chest instead, thinking maybe she could calm him down. Nico wasn't having it. He slapped a pair of Riger pistols on the bar. They were full auto and loaded with electric Panzer rounds. Take it outside. Listen, man, I'm in trouble. She took 3. Nico started counting. His eyes were hard. You don't understand. 2. The man paused, and it was at that moment that Anita saw the telltale print of his own pistol. The man grabbed Anita and hauled her out the back. Nico told them to take it outside, so that's what they were doing. Anita had hoped for Nico's help, but didn't get any. That was smart of him, but a little loyalty could go a long way in this town. They went through the back kitchen, down a hall towards the janitor closet, the smell of a rotting mop thick as a curtain before popping the emergency exit. The sign warning them of an emergency alarm was obviously a lie. He pushed her and she stumbled, falling to the alley floor and bracing herself with her hands. Her stiletto felt woefully inadequate against the gun that was now pointed at her. She decided not to reach for it, yet. Leave me alone, she cried, still on the ground. Not until you give it back. She didn't respond and actually took a moment to think it over. The disc wasn't doing her any good, and if that's all he really wanted, then she should go with it. She lived nearby. A quick trip to her bedside drawer might be the end of this. The cash was gone, but he wasn't asking for that. Just the disc. How do I know you'll let me go? She demanded. I don't give a fuck about you. It's my employer. Please, you don't understand, he said, suddenly looking over his shoulder as a car drove by the alleyway. Cars were not extinct, but personal vehicles weren't common. The license to own one was beyond what most people could muster, so a car did turn heads. But this wasn't vehicle admiration. This was him keeping a lookout. He was hiding from someone. It's at my place. It's nearby. If I give it back, you'll let me go? He moved suddenly and she flinched, expecting to get hit. Instead, he pulled out money. Here's $500. It's yours. I just need the disc. Angry men didn't usually give her cash. She was afraid to take it. I just want the disc, he repeated, forcing the cash into her hands, which she then put in her back pocket. Apparently, he wanted it back so badly he was throwing money at her to get it. Follow me, she said after rising to her feet. He stayed close, not daring let her out of his reach. She recognized a chance to attack as they rounded a corner, to stab him in the eyes or something, but she thought better of it. If all he really wanted was the disc, then she didn't need to take that chance. Men lied, but his voice was so raw and afraid. Just maybe he was telling the truth. Where are we going? He demanded, pulling her by the arm. He wasn't paying as much attention to her as to everything else around him. My apartment, she answered, again picturing how she could stab him. But people rarely died instantly. She'd have to be precise, through an eye or temple. He motioned her forward, letting her first up the stairs. She left the stairs on the 3rd floor and went down the speckled carpet towards her room. A 306 faded above her door. She unlocked the bolt and entered her flop. Daylight cast beams through her living room and enhanced the smell of old peanut sauce coming from the stove because her roommate was an asshole. She ignored her fluffy pink couches and entered her room, pushing open the poster-smothered door. She stepped over clutter to get to her nightstand, which lost a hairbrush and an empty cup as she jostled the drawer open. She dug through the drawer and then dug through it again. The disc should have been right on top, but it wasn't. It was gone. It's not here, she said. My bitch roommate. Don't lie to me, he screamed and pushed her out of the way. Anita watched as he dumped the drawer out in a rage. Then came a flurry of insults that weren't directed at her necessarily, but she still felt suddenly unsafe. What the hell was she thinking, bringing him up here? Fuck! He screamed. He stormed out of her room and Anita exhaled. She shouldn't have brought him up here. She didn't know why she did, except now she prayed he'd just leave. As his anger boiled over, he slammed the door exiting her apartment. She sprang to her feet, quickly bolting the door behind him. "Wait!" His cry pierced the hallway. Anita could see outside her apartment through a monitor on the wall. The guy was in trouble, pinned to the wall by his neck. Oh shit, she groaned. Whoever he'd been afraid of had found him, and now her. She wasn't going to wait around and hope for mercy as she remembered the fire escape window. She slid the window open and put one foot over the ledge, aware of the wind and sun. Not a moment later, her front door exploded, sending shards of wood and plaster across the living room. It was strange, she thought, to notice the hallway was dark. One would think the inhuman strength of shattering her door would be all she noticed. "Stay where you are." The voice was firm and steady, sent a chill down her spine. "Fuck that," she replied and hopped out onto the rusty fire escape. Her weight sent the stairs wobbling and groaning, but she'd sooner jump from the third floor than face the person in her doorway. That guy was not a cop, and that made him something worse. She bounded down the rickety fire escape and continued until a distance of maybe 12 feet separated her from the street below. There was no waiting for the ladder to descend, so she jumped, propelled by fear. Her ankle twisted and she took the rest of the fall with her hands, scraping them. Her fear was strong enough that she looked up, wondering if she needed to keep running. No one was up there, as if they'd given up chase. Not likely. They were probably just taking the stairs. She was up as fast as her ankle would let her, wiping pebbles out of her hands. Damn her roommate to hell. She rounded the corner and anxiously waited for the doors of the Neon Carrot to welcome her again. She saw Nico behind the bar and took the same seat as earlier. She kept an eye on the door behind her. "Come to finish your salad?" Nico asked. "Give me a Bloody Mary," she replied. That was not her usual drink. Nico poured one and slid it towards her. He'd garnished it with some shrimp that she promptly removed in disgust. She'd half expected him to berate her about the trouble in the bar, but he didn't. She wiped shrimp residue onto a napkin while keeping watch on the door. Each time it opened, she panicked, fearing the worst. Each time the door closed safely, she took a sip of the Bloody Mary to calm herself. Eventually, her glass was empty, and enough time had passed that she was less afraid. All the while, her ankle continued to swell. She wouldn't be working tonight, but when was she planning on going home? She couldn't. A girl like Anita had left home enough times with whatever she was wearing that she could do it again. That didn't mean she wanted to. Maybe those goons were gone for good, or maybe they were waiting for her, sitting on her fluffy pink couch. She ordered another drink and took a long sip while she figured it out. This wasn't the hardest problem she'd ever faced. Not in this city. Especially not with $500 in her pocket, but still. Those guys were after the disc too, and that meant her roommate was in the worst kind of trouble, and she probably didn't even know it. Anita thought about calling to warn her, and she also thought about letting her suffer and die for the trouble she'd caused everyone. Anita slammed her empty cup down. It was time to talk to her hacker friend. It was time to find out exactly what the hell she'd gotten herself into.